You might believe in destiny. But if you ask me, and I'm glad you did, there is one powerful force that drives human behavior and changes the world. Money. Abraham Lincoln had lots of problems. One of them, of course, was keeping the Union together north and south, but he also had to work on keeping East and West together. The California Gold Rush brought a lot of people to California, including Southerners who brought their slaves. I mean, somebody had to do the digging, right? So when the Civil War broke out, there was actually a lot of Confederate sympathy in California. There was even talk of creating a pro-slavery Pacific Republic. So in order to keep them in the Union, Lincoln made them this amazing offer. How about a transcontinental railroad and all the wealth that would come with it? In his classic work, Democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville cast a shrewd eye on the American character. Americans, he wrote, were destined to annihilate time and space. He was talking about the amazing new invention, the railroad, that would follow the money from sea to shining sea. Railroads were the original high-speed network. They were as expansive, disruptive, and lucrative as the internet is today.
Railroads are the largest corporations in the world, the American railroads are. And they're unprecedented. It's one thing to have a large, powerful company, but this is a company that spans many states, in fact, spans the entire nation. It's getting its financing from something called Wall Street and stocks and bonds. And in fact, the idea of a corporation is this kind of corporation, and trusts. These are all new financial instruments.
Right.
And so the how to do big industry is being written by the railroads.
These old trains taught 21st century monopolists how to get rich. Today, if you buy something, almost anything, Amazon dictates the terms of the transaction and gets a cut. Why? Because they control the infrastructure. The buyer and seller have to go through them. Guess where Amazon got its business model from?
The railroads control all this, the lifelines of commerce throughout the country, particularly in the West. And so you can have this fantastic crop in Iowa and do everything right and raise this amazing boomer crop of corn, and you are stuck.
Right.
In terms of, you've got one way to get that to market, and that's through the railroad. Right. There's no competition. The railroads can charge you whatever they want.
You might think it was lunacy for Lincoln to launch a transcontinental railroad during the Civil War. It would be kind of like FDR saying, let's beat Hitler and put a man on the moon. But Lincoln knew keeping the 49ers in California happy would keep gold flowing back east to fund the war. And a railroad would go far towards persuading that big blank space in the middle to eventually join the Union. Movies have made us believe that the Wild West was tamed by rugged individuals with a gun on one hip and a gal on the other. Don't believe it. Achieving manifest destiny took thousands of grunt workers, millions of dollars, massive corporate interests, and stupendous government funding. Many of those dollars went into the pockets of a few Sacramento speculators known as the Associates. Their homes were monuments to their wealth and their chutzpah. Collis Huntington once told French reporters, "Your Eiffel Tower is all very well, but where's the money in it?" In 1865, Huntington exploited the chaos and grief after Lincoln's murder to push through a bill extending his railroad line. His partner, Leland Stanford, was governor of California at the same time he headed the Central Pacific Railroad, and he somehow got the state to kick in $15 million to start track construction. Okay, this was olden times and they had different ideas about morality, but still, how could such astounding corruption ever be possible? And because it's a massive government program, all that money gets spent and it's all accounted for and everything's honest and nothing bad happens, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Everything squares up at the end. Yes. Well, not exactly. At the end of the day, they know that they want to keep Congress out of the picture as much as possible. They don't want any oversight. So one way to do that is to give a lot of this stock to congressmen, and that tends to keep them quiet.
Free from interference, the rail tycoons wrote the book on defrauding Washington. They were paid by the mile of track laid, so they created winding, circuitous routes to maximize mileage. Builders received a premium for track laid over mountains, but the term mountain was not defined. Stanford hired geologists to survey the route, and wouldn't you know it, they discovered that the Sierra Nevada range starts way back here in Sacramento. The best scandals are always the railroad scandals. They tend to be very large, somewhat complicated, very colorful, and really expensive. And of the railroad scandals, one of the greatest was the Credit Mobilier scandal of the 19th century. It started when the Union Pacific Railroad charged the US government twice what it actually cost to build the railroad. The rest of the money went into the pockets of the owners and also was paid out in bribes to practically the entire US government, including multiple members of the House, including the Speaker of the House, 4 senators, 1 Secretary of the Treasury, and the Vice President of the United States. And by the way, these were guys from both parties. It was really, in a weird way, encouraging to see such bipartisan corruption. Here's a cartoon of the day depicting the Credit Mobilier ward in the Union Pacific Hospital. The scandal threatened to bring down the whole pyramid of greed, debt, and double dealing. But it turns out the Transcontinental Railroad was just too big to fail. So the robber barons lived to steal another day. The Iron Monster was a technological marvel that embodied America's march of progress. Walt Whitman sang its praises, type of the modern, emblem of motion and power, pulse of the continent. The view was different and a tad less romantic on the ground. On the theory that the people who had built the Great Wall could surely handle a railroad, thousands of Chinese laborers were hired.
So they're willing to come and do this kind of work, but they're going to be incredibly cheap. You can pay a Chinese laborer, I mean, it's explicit racism, but you can pay a Chinese laborer much lower wages and work them much longer hours, and also send them to do the most dangerous jobs, you know, to set the dynamite charges and that kind of thing, because you have that kind of power over them.
The Chinese worked really hard and didn't complain, which was a mistake. Other immigrants hated the competition, and the Chinese Exclusion Act soon banned Chinese from entering the country and denied citizenship to those already in the U.S. On May 10, 1869, the nation waited breathlessly for word that the continent was united. But people were like paying attention via telegraph or their newspapers, like everybody knew it was going to happen.
And they brought photographers, and they set up that very dramatic picture that many people have seen, which is the 2 locomotives nose to nose, hundreds of workers, champagne bottles in hand, and all the, the key figures of the railroad are there. Right. And it's a great moment, and they set it up very dramatically. They have a golden spike that's specially forged, and a silver hammer, and Leland Stanford gets the honor of driving that last spike. They have telegraph wire connected to it, so that when he hammers in the spike, it sends out a signal to the world. They knew that people were gathering in big open squares. Most big cities had newspaper row, all the collections of newspapers. So thousands of people were gathering for this ceremony. And when the lights go on or somebody fires off a gun to say the continent is spanned, is literally as dramatic a moment in people's minds as when Neil Armstrong walks on the moon. It's just got that, can you believe what we have just pulled off?
The triumphant headlines missed another story. The line had been built so quickly and so shoddily that it would take 5 more years to repair and reposition large sections of poorly laid track. Huntington and Stanford pioneered the practice of spending other people's money. Each invested a paltry few $1,000s and ended up with $20 billion in today's money. It's nice work if you can get it. In those days, it was customary for the ultra-rich to endow great centers of higher learning. For example, Leland Stanford and his Stanford University. In 1975, the Stanford administrators decided to retire their somewhat problematic Indian mascot, and they asked the student body to pick a new symbol to represent Stanford to the world. And the students overwhelmingly voted for the Stanford Robber Barons. The administration did not go for that, and to this day, Stanford does not have an official mascot. But those students, they knew their history. They just looked around and followed the money. The railroad had conquered space and time.
When you have these intersecting networks of railroads, it's really important that 12 o'clock in New York is 12 o'clock in Baltimore is 12 o'clock anywhere else, because when you're setting up schedules where trains crisscross tracks.
If the train is leaving here at noon and getting there at 2, then their clock better be the same clock as you have, otherwise the train is going to run into another one.
Right, and it's going to be disastrous and expensive and everything else. So in 1883, the big railroads got together without Congress, without any government oversight, and just divided up the American continent into 4 time zones and worked it out so that there was standard time and then also the time zones.
Back when this railroad thing was but a dream, it seemed so risky that private investors needed a sweetener. Land. Lots and lots of land. Over 12,000 acres for every mile of track built. In the end, land grants from state and federal governments transferred 180 million acres into private hands, an area bigger than Texas. The rail barons became empire builders, making further fortunes from coal, iron, silver, lumber, and livestock. And what about those rugged Americans who settled the West? Those legendary icons of freedom and independence. They lived at the mercy of their landlords. The railroad tycoons.